Hello! Today we are going to get to know in detail the pattern Zigzag that has become very popular lately. It has attracted my attention as well and made me feel like getting to know it as well. After I have done, I'd like to share my thoughts concerning this pattern with you. First of all, I'd like to thank a wonderful viewer, Irina Penkina, who was managing the creation of this tutorial. I was consulting her, she gave me very useful pieces of advice, which has made it much easier to explore the pattern and to understand the principle of weaving it. At first I thought that I would never master it, that counting is too laborious and boring. But things are never as bad as they seem. So, let's start. The number of possible varieties of this pattern is almost unlimited. I have trained for a while and chosen this kind of a pattern for the tutorial. And still I'd like to show you the other patterns I have tried as well. First of all, you have to calculate before starting this pattern. So we start calculating from the number of the poles of the base. I'd like to show you the algorithm, how I have come to it. To get the pattern like this, I've taken the number of the poles of the base divisible 8. I wanted to emphasize this relief against the flat background. On the sites Одноклассники, Страна мастеров, I have seen the works with several reliefs. For example, in front of 3, behind 1, then in front of 2, behind 1. So you can vary the number of the poles and get different varieties of reliefs. There can be patterns like this as well. But here I wanted to make large-scaled relief, a working tube in front of 3 poles, followed by a fine printed cotton pattern, and then a large-scaled relief again. For this pattern, I needed the number of the poles of the base divisible 8. Here is the scheme of this pattern, the lowest one. 3 poles in front, then we lead a working tube behind 1 pole, in front of 1, behind 1, in front of 1, behind 1. As a result we get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 tubes of the base is a repeat of the pattern. And I will have to repeat this motif several times. So, we see that the number of the poles along the whole article has to be divisible 8. But for the pattern to shift, it has to be either +1 or -1. So, the number of the poles has to be divisible 8 plus or -1. So, this way I have calculated how to weave this article. It is going to be a basket. While weaving a novel bottom, I have gotten 49 tubes of the base. I have looked. 49 is 48 plus 1. 48 is 6 multiply 8. So I had to add nothing. There are 49 tubes of the base. So I start weaving following the pattern I have thought of. 48 plus 1. I will get the pattern like this. The only thing I wanted to add is that while weaving this pattern you can use with good effect the contrast between the tubes of the frame and the pattern itself. Here you can see the dark tubes. They are not very well seen, but they are. Here I've decided not to make play with the contrast, but only to emphasize the relief. The second point is that in this case I've decided to use double tubes as the tubes of the base. And as I usually do lately, especially with printed cotton, I weave with the help of skewers for barbecue. They help me hold the shape and form the pattern. This way it is more comfortable for me. As for Irina Penkina, I have asked her, she doesn't use skewers. So it is up to you, depending on what kind of paper you use for the poles of the base. Skilled weavers hardly need any crutches. But my paper is rather soft, so I prefer to use the skewers. For this pattern, from the very beginning, we mark the first pole. It will be very important for the place of turn. We turn from the first pole we start weaving with. That is why we have to mark it. I mark it this way. Now, glue a tube from behind to this marked pole. Or you can just adjoin it without gluing and glue it afterwards in the end. And start weaving. So, first of all, we have to draw the tube in front of 3 poles, behind 1 pole, in front of 1, behind 1, in front of 1, behind 1. It is according to the pattern we have chosen. Count to check yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The first motif has been woven. Repeat. In front of 3, behind 1, in front of 1, behind 1, in front of 1, behind 1. Got it. Count. From the beginning I always count. Then I am just humming some rhythm while weaving, but at the beginning, before I get used to the rhythm, I repeat it and count. Here is a very important point. We have finished the repeat, and then there will follow 3 poles in front again. I have asked Irina how she manages to do everything so neatly, to avoid any joints being seen. Actually, the answer is clear, and we all know it very well, but honestly, I don't always follow it. In this case, I have done. First of all, for printed cotton weave, Irina glues the tubes. While trying to weave my first box in the printed cotton technique, I noticed that while pulling some tubes used to slide apart. So I've asked Irina how she copes with this problem. First of all, she always lengthens the tubes on the inner side. And secondly, for printed cotton weave, she glues the tubes. I'd like my work to look neat as well, so I've followed her advice with pleasure. So, we have stuck the tubes on the inner side. Let's continue. 3 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind. We have woven 8 poles more. In the first couple of rows we count, afterwards it will be easier. 3 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind. One more important point. Irina weaves with slightly wet tubes. The tubes have to be not fully dried. I have started weaving without moistening the tubes, and I feel it is not going perfect. I do not moisten the ends, because this way it is easier to lengthen the tubes. I will moisten the middles of the tubes a little, which will make weaving easier. Here I am going to lengthen on the inner side. Glue. I often forget about it. Finished. 3 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind. For this pattern it is also very important, especially if weaving with contrast tubes, to make sure that the poles are vertical. In my case, the plastic woven basket I use as a base will help. If you weave some box around the base, you can even draw vertical and horizontal lines on the base, in order to keep the poles vertical, and to press the poles to the lines. So continue. 3 in front, 1 behind. They tend to move aside all the time. Here the place of connection happens on the inner side naturally. If I work with a more complicated pattern, drawing a working tube behind 1, 2, 3 poles, I will skip a scheme in front of myself to avoid getting confused. Now I am working with a 4th scheme. So we have woven 1 row. Look. There follows shifting, because there are 49 tubes on the base instead of 48. 3 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind, 1 in front, 1 behind. Do you see? Our volumetric row is shifting 1 pole. It is not clearly seen yet, we will see it later. Before starting to weave the pattern, beside defining the number of the poles of the base, we have to define the number of the rows we are going to weave. I've decided that I need 13 centimeters for my basket. I have estimated the number of the rows comparing to my old articles. The tubes are identical, and decided that every time before turn I am going to weave 8 rows. So I weave 8 rows in one direction, then turn and weave 8 rows in the opposite direction. I'm going to make 3 turns, and let's look what I'm going to get. Continue weaving up to the 8th row.